Welcome to Computer Page Makeup Screencast. In this screencast, we are going to review exercise 01, file management. We're going to take a look at the contents of the folder, properly set up our file management, and then begin to lay out our InDesign document so that it mirrors the sample that's been provided to us. So first, let's open up the folder. And many of you might see it in list mode first, but I like to, for the sake of the screencast, I like to be able to preview everything in the thumbnail view. So when we're taking a look at the contents, we can see that we have a PDF file. We have several PSD files. And then we have a PNG file. All right. Now, in class, we clarified raster versus vector. PSD, the extension stands for Photoshop document, and that means that it would be a raster image that would fall in the subfolder for raster underneath images. A PNG file is a raster image, however, it's not conducive for desktop publishing and commercial printing, so it would belong in the working folder along with the project folder for how to create project or file management PDF files. So anytime you have instructions or supplied text files or information that's relative to the project but not necessarily used in the design, that information belongs in the working folder. So first, let's set up our file management. So I'm going to right click and create a new folder, and we're going to call this one working. And I'm going to drag the PNG file into that working folder, and I'm going to drag the PDF file into that folder. We'll create another new folder. We'll call it fonts. There's not fonts utilized for this particular project, but it's still a good habit and good practice to create the fonts folder, because it will be necessary in future projects and in the professional work environment. So we're going to create a fonts folder. Next, we're going to create an images folder. And then we're going to create two additional folders. One will be called raster. One will be called vector. So I'm just right clicking and creating the folders inside of this. So there are no vector files. Vector would be an Illustrator based file. So it would be the extension AI. Sometimes you'll see EPS, or sometimes you'll see SVG, which stands for Scalable Vector Graphic. In this case, we have nothing outside of a PSD file, so I'm going to highlight those PSD files, drag them into this raster folder, drag these into the raster folder, and now the vector folder and the raster folder are actually subfolders of the images, so they belong in the image folder. So these are my three primary folders for the file management. Now I'm going to push this back into list view, and then I'm going to click on the little drop down arrow so we can see our contents, and we'll take a look. We have everything in the proper location for raster, and then we have our two files that belong in our working folder. So this is what your file management should look like at the start. Remember, with any exercise or project involving Adobe InDesign, it's important and vital to set up the file management first. Okay, please get in the habit of setting that up first. What I want to do first, let's take a look at the example. It's called the handout visual. So I'm just going to double click on this. It's going to open up in preview by default. And let me just enlarge this a little bit. So when we're looking at this, it seems very simplistic in nature. We have 5 images that are placed onto an InDesign document. We have some preset measurements that we're going to make use of with the rules in InDesign, and so the guides will assist us with that. And then you can see we have various picture frames that would have images placed in it. So when we are looking at these measurements, the one measurement that's not indicated on the handout is this margin area, and that should be noted as a 1/2 inch margin, or 0.5. Okay, so 0.5, and then across the top we have 1 inch, 3.5, 7.5, and 10. And then coming down the document from the top left to the bottom left corner, we have 1 inch, and then we have 3, and then we have 5.5 and 7.5. All right. So I like to personally leave this file open so that I can go back to it and reference it. So I'll switch back and forth between my InDesign document and the example file. So in order to hide it, if you don't know, if you hit Command H on your keyboard, it'll hide that particular application. All right. So we need to create our InDesign document. So I'm going to access InDesign, and I'm going to, remember, you can either click on Command New here inside of the internal menu. You can hit Command N, or you can go up under File on the menu and select New Document. I'm just going to use the shortcut key, Command N. We've reviewed the contents of the document setup palette, and remember, it's going to recall the preferences that you utilized from a previous document. Now I've tried to speed up the process and went ahead and punched in the necessary information to set up our document, but we're going to review that together. So I'm going to hit Command Tab on my keyboard. So Command Tab will allow me to navigate between various applications, and I'm going to select Preview, and we're going to take a look at the content. So we can see that the valley image is the background. We have the scuba diver, the New York City skyline, the lifeguard, and the cowboy with the lasso on horseback. All right, so I'm going to use Command Tab and get back to InDesign. So my dimensions for my document are 11 wide, 8.5 high. It's only one page. Facing pages is not checked. It's only one column. Margins, I'm going to have them set to a 1/2 inch. Remember, they're not indicated on the example, but they are a 1/2 inch. And by looking at the document, Command Tab again, you'll note that there's nothing that bleeds off the outside of the document. So I don't need to be concerned with the bleed or slug area at this point. So let's go back to InDesign. So I have everything set up, 1/2 inch margins, proper dimensions, proper orientations. We're going to hit Create. Now, the best approach to execute this particular project is to first utilize the guides that you will pull out from the rules along the top and left side of the work area. Okay, so similar to Illustrator, if your rulers aren't visible, if you hit Command R on the keyboard, so Command R will make the rulers invisible or visible. All right. So, and with the assistance of the smart guides and it indicating the measurements, I'm going to start with the left. I'm just going to click right on the rule, and I'm going to drag the first one out to 1 inch. I'm going to go back to the roll, drag the next one out to 3.5. Drag this one out to 7.5. And then we'll drag the last one out to 10. And then let's start from the top and pull down for the horizontal rules. And then I want you to kind of pay attention to the difference. If I maintain arrow position or pointer position outside of the document dimensions, the rules or the guides will also extend outside of the edge of the document. So first one, we're going to drag down to 1 inch. So you can see how this guide is on the outside of the document. This guide maintains its coordinates on the inside edge of the document. Okay, so at 1 inch, pull the next one down to 3. The next one comes down to 5.5. And then finally, we're going to pull one down to 7.5. All right. Now we'll flip back and look at the example real quick. Okay, so we have the valley, the desert valley image that's in the background. Again, the scuba diver in the top left, the New York City skyline in the top right, the lifeguard, and then the cowboy. Okay, so Command Tab gets me back to InDesign. We're going to start and think of this as kind of like making a sandwich. We need to put the bottom of the bun or the piece of bread on the counter first. And my analogy for that would be utilizing the valley. So think about this as the stacking process. So I'm going to access my rectangular frame tool. And I'm going to make sure that I'm inside of the margins, right? So again, we're going to refer back. So I still have that 1/2 inch margin, so I know that I need to start at the corner of the margin. I'm going to start up here in the corner of the margin. I'm going to click, holding down the mouse, and dragging down to the bottom right hand corner. And I'll let up. And then remember, you're not opening an image, you're placing an image. Alright, so if you try to open an image, you're going to get an error because the only thing that InDesign can open up are InDesign files, either files that it's created or previous versions of InDesign. Okay, so with that rectangular picture frame selected, remember you can either go to File and come down to Place, or you can hit Command D. I like to use the shortcut for Command D. We want to make sure that you're located and you're in the proper folder. So we're in the file management folder that's on my desktop. We need to locate images and we need to locate raster. And we're looking for Monument Valley, right? So if you're unsure of the naming, it's also okay just to simply click on one at a time so you can see in the little thumbnail preview panel what image you have selected. So Monument Valley, we'll click Open and it'll place it in. Now, we really don't have to manipulate this too much. If I flip back, you can see that it's in pretty good position as far as the sizing and location of the image. So we're not going to really manipulate that one too much. Okay, we'll start with the top left with the scuba diver. So I'm going to utilize the same tool, rectangular frame tool, and utilizing the guides that I have created. I'm going to click and drag. They should snap into place. With that picture frame still highlighted and selected, I'm going to hit Command D, and I'm going to locate the diver. Now I can either select it and then hit Open, or I can double click on the image and it will directly place it. Now you're going to note right away that there's some spacing around the outside, and if we refer back to the sample, it fills the entire frame with the contents of the image. Alright, so we need to make sure that we match that up. Clients will be looking for accuracy and precision from the work that we provide to them. So I'm going to Command Tab. Let's get back to InDesign, and it's pretty easy. If with the text or the picture frame selected, if I can utilize, it doesn't matter if I have the selection tool or the rectangular frame tool. If I right click inside of the frame and then come down to fitting, and we're going to fill the frame proportionately, and it populates that, and we'll do a little comparison, and it looks pretty accurate. Okay, Command Tab gets us back to InDesign, and then we're going to continue that process. So again, really don't have to deviate away from the tools too much. Rectangular frame tool, we'll come over to the top right. I'm going to click and drag, kind of snap this into place, and we're looking. I'm going to hit Command D, and we're looking for the New York City skyline. I'll double click and place it. This one fills the frame with the contents appropriately, so we don't have to worry about manipulating that one. We'll come down to the bottom right hand side, and I'm going to click and drag, and this particular image was the lifeguard. So again, with the picture frame selected, I'm going to hit Command D, or I can go up under File, Place, double click on lifeguard, and this one also fits the content within the framing appropriately, so we don't have to mess with that. And then we're going to come over here to the one on the bottom left. We'll click and drag with our rectangle picture frame tool, and one last time I'm going to hit Command D, and we're going to locate the horse and double click. Oh, and you can see that this one is much too large for the frame, right? So again, we'll compare it to the example provided, and you can see that we have a better fitting. That as far as location, we don't know the exact measurements of this, so we're going to eyeball it for the sake of this demo and screencast. But you know, there's a little bit of a margin at the top, a little bit of a margin at the bottom between the top of the lasso and the horse. So I'm going to Command Tab back to my InDesign document. So I'm going to right click inside of the picture frame and go to Fitting. And if I click on Fill Frame Proportionately, well, it fits accordingly and it looks okay, but you can see that there's a little bit of a difference. There's some slight differences in size. Our cowboy on the horse is a little bit smaller than the example provided. So Command Tab gets us back between the applications. Command Tab will take us back. So the best approach to this would be utilize the direct selection tool, and I'm going to make sure that my image is selected, not the frame. So in order to do that, I'm going to kind of get us back there. So I'm going to right click, Fitting, fill the frame proportionately. You see it's a little bit too small. Our frame is filled, but we need to increase the size of the image. So I'm going to grab my direct selection tool. When I mouse over the image, you see the hand. Now I need to click it with the hand. Now you'll see the brown bounding box appear. And again, I'm just going to hold down my Shift key, and I'm going to drag from the corner a little bit. You drag real slow, you kind of get this ghosted appearance. It's a little bit translucent that allows us to see the image as you increase in size. This is something that I like to practice from a professional standpoint. It just allows me to have some better control. And then I'll let up when I feel that I'm in the proper position. And this looks pretty good, right? So I look like I'm in a pretty good location. So in comparison to the example provided, this is pretty accurate. Looks like we have everything placed in their proper position. So the final phase of the exercise would be saving the document. So we're going to do a File, and we're going to do a Save As. So the save functions in InDesign are very similar to all of your other computer programs, and specifically Adobe Illustrator and Adobe Photoshop. So you have the save and the save as. So because this is a brand new file, we need to perform the save as. We're going to do the save as. I want to make sure that I'm saving it into the project folder, but none of the individual contents folder. So I need to make sure that I'm not saving it into the raster folder. I'll click on this drop down, and it's going to belong in the parent folder. So I'm going to select 01 File Management. That should still make those 3 additional folders visible to me. And you can leave the extension .indd on the file name. It just stands for InDesign Document. I'm going to highlight the untitled section, and I'm going to label this my last name _ file management. And I'm going to hit save. And then we are completed with that. Our final step, I'm going to hit Command W, or I can simply close out or X out of the window. I'm just going to hit Command W. And I'm going to hide InDesign. To do that, Command H. And I'm going to hide the example. Actually, we can close out the example. I don't need it anymore. So we can Command Q to quit out of preview, or Command W to close the window. And now we're taking a look at what the folder should look like when you're complete, right? We have the working folder with the PDF file and the example. We have a fonts folder. Nothing will be in the fonts folder. We have the images folder with the raster and the vector. Nothing will be located in the vector. The raster has the images that are housed and held onto the InDesign document, and the InDesign document simply floats inside of the project folder. Alright, so if we look at the thumbnail view, this is what we would have. And then from here, I'm going to close this window. I will right click on this, and I'm going to compress 01 File Management. It won't take very long. After it's compressed, you will upload the compressed file to your computer page makeup folder on your Google Drive.